All right. Hello and welcome back to the show. So I'm super excited for my guest today, Kevin, because Kevin is a real estate investor and rehabber, and he is the owner of RestoreSTL based in the St. Louis area. And he's actually rehabbed over hundreds of homes, all the way starting in the early mid 2000s. So Kevin's going to be sharing with us a little bit about his journey as a real estate investor. If you want to get into real estate investing, rehabbing, what is that going to take? And just sharing some value with us today. So, Kevin, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you join us here today.
Yeah, Kobe, great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And before we dig into kind of your story and talking about what you're doing today, I would love for you to have an opportunity to share with the audience about how did you get started in real estate and what was that journey like in the beginning? So, how did you get into this? Where did this all start?
So Kobe, I probably well, I'm a bit older than you are here, but the way we were told, like the way we were brought up, was go to school, get a good job, retire when you're 65, right? That has kind of been the plan of corporate America, what people kind of push you into. I tried that, it just didn't fit. So if you ever feel like that square peg just being pounded into that round hole, like it doesn't fit. So I became an engineer, and I would move paper literally from the left of my desk to the left to the right of my desk, and it just wasn't satisfying. I was watching all these people do amazing things, and I was just recording it with paper. And I kind of wanted some more. And that was back when like there was big developments going on here in St. Louis. Like they were clearing tracts of land, building hundreds, if not thousands of houses. People were just doing stuff. And I was just watching, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't. So I quit my job. I told my then girlfriend, if you move with me, I'll probably marry you. If not, I'll see you later. Classic good guy stuff, right? So we're in St. Louis, moved to North Carolina, lived there for a handful of years, but that's where I fell in love with rehabbing houses. And I thought that's how I needed to do it, was swinging a hammer. So I started swinging a hammer, rehabbing houses. We moved back to St. Louis, and I became a general contractor, all because I thought I needed construction to know real estate, so I went that route, kind of the easiest way, right? It was not. I spent like over a decade learning construction, all the way from swinging a hammer, running a company, being a project manager, sales and market. Like I've learned all about construction because I thought I needed to know that. Turns out you don't need to know that, Kobe. You just need to know that it's a useful trade inside of real estate. So from there, I decided to become a full-time real estate investor, right? So I use the term roadmap. And I created my roadmap from being a general contractor, swinging a hammer guy, to becoming a full-time real estate investor, right? The Kevin 0.0 was the swing a hammer guy. Kevin 1.1 or 1.0 was going to be the guy who had consistent income, had a marketing plan, had some of the people in place. 2.0 Kevin was, doing some wholesaling, doing some deals, and then 3.0 was going to be a full-time real estate investor, right? And that was, oh my gosh, if I could do real estate full-time, that'd be a dream. I thought that I was just talking make-believe. Well, I've been living in that area for what, 15 years now or so, so it's one of those like, okay, now that I'm here, you don't see the other mountain while you're on, still climbing. And now that you get there, there's so much more opportunity. I went into the speaking stuff. I went into the coaching world and all the stuff that people tell you to do. And then well, I'll tell you this. So when I really started my investor journey, when I went full time, um, some of that landing pad was cut a little short. I tried to do corporate America here in St. Louis when I got back, and it just didn't work. And we decided to split. I was a project manager at that time. We were doing 100 houses in sugarcane fields, like just cool stuff. But I was also still the paper guy, not actually doing it. So I left and we started living the dream. It was a short runway. And I got up to the point, and I don't know how you did it, Kobe, but for me, I had a marketing budget of $100, and then it was $500, and then $1,000 a month, and then it got up to 5,000 and 10,000 and up to $20,000. but I was a solopreneur. I was a guy wearing all the hats. And I was rehabbing houses. I was physically swinging a hammer, a one-man crew, and then I'd go run some wholesale deals, and then I would go do these other things. Um, and then I finally started where it finally was working, and I was feeling fantastic. I was so proud of myself. And then I found out that my dad had pancreatic cancer, which, if you're familiar with it, it's one of those like I was there when the doctor told him, and he's like, "Jake, you've had a good life. Why don't you wrap up a few things, and you'll probably be gone in 6 months or less." Like that was the diagnosis. He ended up living for over 2 years, right? We fought it, we did some stuff. But what happened is, like, I was one of the primary caregivers, and emotionally, I started falling apart. I would show up for him and the chemo things and at these appointments and these doctors. Well, what wasn't I doing? I wasn't running my company. Remember, I had a house I was working on, and I felt like I was running in sand. Like I would look, I spent 8 hours there, but what did you do? I maybe installed a ceiling fan. Like I was not productive. At that point, I was running $20,000 a month marketing campaigns using pay-per-clicks and all these different strategies. When the phone rang, I was empty. I couldn't even pick it up to say, what can I do? I mean, just everything I built up was just melting away. And then he eventually passed, and that's when I found out like he was my best friend. Uh, and what's fun about today is actually his birthday. I do this on purpose because they're like days of legacy, like to remember and honor it. So it's just kind of neat that, it actually he'll be gone 10 years now, next month. But it's one of those like it also was one, it was a low point for me, but that's also where I kind of forged some of the characteristics that I could help other people do. I now recognize, so in our podcast, I talk about the most important real estate really is between your ears. Your personal drives your professional, and it's all about relationships. And you learn this stuff on your bad days, not on your good days, right? So I was fortunate to have this forging moment where everything was melting away and falling apart. And I got to rebuild. I joined years later. I joined a company, and if one house flip was good, I was doing 10 a month. Like I was doing all these things. I had multiple crews and organizations, and I was just doing all this stuff. But then I kind of got lost, because I was doing all the parts of the business that I didn't necessarily want. I didn't get to know the neighbors. I didn't get to know the homeowners because I had all these other pieces running, and I was the guy just taking all the risk and writing the checks. So I actually got to start all over. I got into the coaching world. I got into the speaking and training world, and I loved it. That's when I found out I really liked some of the stuff. Um, and then I split from this company, so the where I found my identity kind of wasn't there anymore. And I had to realize, like, okay, who am I? Who was I with the company, and who am I for me? And now I feel like I get to work with the people I know, like, and trust. So now it's been about a year and a half ago. One of my first students, David Onanian, he's like, Kevin, I made this company. I found this niche inside real estate that we're targeting investor-minded agents. And, but he was struggling telling what it was or how to do it or this little, freaking golden egg that's just sitting there. So he's like, hey, why don't you join? And it turns out it was with EXP. So I became an agent. I joined his downline. And I'll tell you, Edgar, Kobe, we now help recruit investor-minded agents because I totally believe the way legislation is going nationwide, right? That wholesaling, just having a house under contract and selling a contract, it's still legal, but now those parameters are getting tighter and tighter, and they want you to have a license, right? If you're going to do this in any volume. Okay, it doesn't actually hurt you as a wholesaler to have a license. A lot of people think it does. I haven't seen any of that. Oh, there's so much more rules and regulations. Actually, all you have to say is, I'm a licensed real estate agent, and you're good. I'm acting as an agent or I'm acting as an investor. I still could do subject twos. I could still do this. I actually found I get a lot more low-hanging fruit for listings. Like, hey, this doesn't work. Let me help you here. It makes you look as a better professional, kind of connecting the dots for people. But what we started doing is recognizing that any agent, so like yourself, Kobe, like how can I help you become an investor? Because as agents, as professionals, we get first dibs basically on what's coming out, right? Especially if you're using your marketing correctly. So how can I take some of the ones that I want and take them and rehab them and do what I need to? And then how can I list some that need to be listed or connect the dots and then also be compensated for that time and energy? So my company, which is the RestoreSTL, we believe in creating home ownership. So I actually took that, I took some of my rentals, and I actually helped my tenants turn around and buy the houses. So one of the ones I had, she's been living in that house a long time. And I was like, Julie, like, do you like your house? She's like, yeah, I do. I was like, are you interested in buying it? She's like, oh my gosh. We run through the different scenarios, help her learn about her credit and her finances. And we got her approved, and she actually bought our house. And she's like, Kevin, I am the first person in my family. So we're talking parents, grandparents, etc., cousins, sisters, brothers, to buy a house. And it's just one of those like that feels so good. It feels good being able to help bridge the gap from, like actually being somebody who owns something, having your own equity and growth and kind of that whole. Now, is it an easy process? No, but it's also it's really fulfilling. So now I want to know how many more people can I help? How can I take some houses that are broken that need a new home and give it an opportunity for somebody who can grow and love and even do a little work on their own house. So that's kind of, in a quick nutshell there, Kobe, a little bit of how this has turned around. So if I would recap some of that, it's not an easy path. Those bad days are actually your forging moments to help you be able to, if nothing else, empathize or like relate to people in the bad situations. um, and my mom's a teacher, so I'm going to end up teaching you things if by accident. But did you know this? Like, as an investor, right? Typically, the way we get opportunities, we are talking to somebody on their worst days, right? So in my case, it would have been, my dad either in cancer or just after he passed, or, I'd be talking to the family because there's real estate involved. But have you heard of the 5 Ds of distress?
I've heard of them. I can't name them off the top of my head right now, but I've been around investors long enough to know.
Okay, good. So the first D is debt. So foreclosures or any, somebody a short sale going through money issues. The second one is disease. So somebody gets sick. So cancer in my dad's case, or also think of like senior living. So somebody they might have fallen, broken their hip, they can't go there, they got to go somewhere else. We have death. So if somebody died, we use probate or estate sales or something like that. We have displacement. So somebody was, I think of a Fortune 500, like they were living in St. Louis, now they have to go to California or Houston, right? However that works, somebody needs to go. And then that's also, I'd probably put senior transitioning there too. Hey, you can't go back home. You're going to go to an assisted living. And then the fifth one is divorce. So two people once loved each other, shared a home. Now they don't love each other anymore, and they need to liquidate their assets. So those are typically the 5 Ds of distress. Somebody needs to make a decision and quickly, and they just want to need to have a helpful guide to making a good exit. So.
Right. Yeah. And thank you for that, man. So I really appreciate you being able to share your story and just kind of sharing with us your journey getting started, some of the mistakes in the beginning that you were making and the transition that you made. And now, coaching other people to get into investing, coaching agents, teaching them how to be more investor minded as well. So definitely want to get into all of that. But I mean, the first thing I really want to kind of get your take on was, what was that transition like, right? Because you mentioned in the beginning, you were the one doing everything on your own. You were the one swinging the hammer. You're kind of like your own personal, everything, right? Doing everything on your own. You were a solopreneur. How did that transition look for you when you started to, start bridging out and build an actual business with systems inside of it? Was that like a difficult transition? I've ran into a lot of people who were solopreneurs that have found it to be difficult to, kind of let go of some of that control. So what was that like for you? How did that go?
So I had the pleasure of being behind the scenes for a lot of other people for a while. So when I really broke out, so like right now, like what CRM are you using, right? So EXP gives us CRMs. I used some before. Obviously, I got to here, so there's some things that you're used to. A lot of the investor software has a CRM that's attached and everybody talks about it, and I think it's fantastic. But reality is, I started with a notepad. My CRM was, hey, I talked to Kobe today. Hey, I talked to, you just start with something, but you got to work it, because it was like, okay, now I go back to page one. Okay, call Kobe, call this person, call this person. Like, okay, call two. You just got to start and do it. What I've noticed now, especially as we're scaling, because I got burns. I had three crews. I had office support. I had project management. So I had all these people, right? And I eventually had to let them all go and I started over. In that process, you don't think about it. You think about it in war, you don't think it in business. But I had like this PTSD about building people around me, right? My secret sauce really is I like people. And I wanted to have them close, and I built cultures of all these different organizations I was a part of, but I got timid. I got scared about bringing people in again. What if they hurt me again? What if this happens? So now, as we're doing it, it's really been fun. Like I have a tight group of people and it's awesome. I don't have to be the expert on everything. If I'm having a bad day, these guys are running with it. If there's a disagreement with somebody like an outside person, one of these guys are stepping up and having that fight where I don't have to do it. I don't have to lose my cool for some petty issue. It's one of those like I got people who love and respect and guard me from some of those people to make sure that bad energy doesn't get in, so we can be the connectors that we are. I it makes sure like if I am going to be, oh, gosh, I could go so many rabbit holes here, but I have a lot of friends, Kobe, and what I've noticed is I call two friends a day. People have all these elaborate marketing strategies. That's mine. I'm not using hey, Kobe, if you were gonna buy or sell a house, who would you tell your neighbor to go? Would they call me? Would you like, dude, I don't want to be a douchebag. And I know a lot of the organizations push something like this, and sphere of influence is huge, right? But how can I be of service to somebody, add value to their life, and then they just know what I do, through conversations or just now through history, that it's one of those like, oh, you need to talk to my neighbor, or can you help here? What's cool now is I'm having nonprofits calling and saying, hey, can you help some of our people become homeowners? And it's like, yes, that falls in line with my ethics, my morals, like what I stand for. Like, how can I get behind this? And that's when it's just like, man, I feel like I am so blessed to be able to walk this journey. And it's not easy, but I feel like incredibly blessed and fortunate to be able to connect the dots for people.
Yeah, so you're able to find meaning in what you do as well, right? Because I think there's a lot of people who are, going out there getting things done on a day-to-day basis, and they're very effective in what they do, but they're not necessarily finding it to be very fulfilling, right? All the success that they have. So you're able to find that with, not just kind of growing your own people within your own team, but also helping others, right? Like you mentioned, your strategy, your marketing is just calling two friends a day. I think it's something very, very doable, right? And a lot of agents, a lot of investors can go out there and just do, right? Calling two friends a day, going out there, making new friends. Wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't you say so? Or is that something that only you can do?
And that's the thing is, it sounds so easy, or people are like, ah, I didn't do it today, I'll do it tomorrow. Well, that's one healthy habit that you're missing, and you just lost an opportunity, and it doesn't always have to, like, I know so many people are so focused in making this work, work, work. We went and saw a comedian with some friends, we went out and, go sledding with some friends, call them up and do something that's not a part of real estate. It's going to come up at some point, especially if they ask about, what's something in your life. Like, are you a reader?
Yes, yes, I am.
So, like John Maxwell, like the law of reciprocity.
Mhm.
Did I say it right? Yeah.
Yeah, reciprocity. Yeah.
That like I know the word, just it doesn't always come out right. But it's one of those like, how can I give to you? And then what comes back is even more, right? The book, The Go-Giver, same idea. Like, how can I give or plant more good seeds to be able to harvest it? Is it always a one for one? Not at all. But it's one of those like, if you really do plant and reap good seeds, the harvest is plenty. And that's when you get invited to some pretty cool tables to talk at and some pretty cool podcasts to be on. Right, Covey?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When you put value out there into the world, eventually some value is going to come back because people recognize it. And it might not be like you said, right? It might not be like direct one to one because you could be doing something of value of service for someone else, and maybe they don't necessarily appreciate it or have the ability to reciprocate right the value that you've given to them, but maybe somebody else is watching, right? And you didn't even know you were being watched. And then they thought that wow, this person provides so much value. I want to work with them. So whenever you're doing something like this, you never know who's watching, who's, out there just kind of peeking behind and just kind of seeing what you are and what you're about. And then that's how you open doors to new opportunities, which I'm sure, you've done quite a bit of as well.
Yeah, it really is cool to see what unfolds and the people you get to meet and when they're like, "Hey, we have this event. Can you come and speak, or can you come?" And it's just like, "Oh my gosh, they know me!" It's always kind of fun when that happens.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. So I want to kind of get your take now on what you guys are doing with real estate agents that are investor minded, right? Because there's a lot of agents out there. A lot of agents, I think, now are getting into investing, are looking into how do I become an investor as well. They're buying their first rental properties or doing their first flips. So what are you guys doing when it comes to helping agents be more investor minded? Are you helping agents work with other investors? Are you helping them become investors themselves? Is it a combination of both? How are you guys serving the investor-minded agent to help them think more like an investor, but also continue utilizing their real estate license for, what they do best as well?
So, one, I look at some of this as just low-hanging fruit. So I've had many students, and obviously I talk with a lot of people. One of the things that people look at, the first obstacle is, well, I don't have the money. I remember I was talking with some very high producing agents, like top people, not of our brokerage, but of another one. I'm like, man, you are fantastic. This is crazy. And I was like, hey, do you invest? And they're like, oh no, we don't have the money for that. And it's like, oh man, you don't have to have it all in your wallet. Like there's ways of structuring a deal. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's hard money lenders. I'm a strong fan of private lenders, right? So how can I structure your surplus, right? Because we should be investing in something else, right? So how can I take your surplus, give you a hard asset, and give you a higher return than you normally get somewhere else? And then we all win. So it's not just a win-win scenario. You're looking for win-win-win-win-win scenario, like everybody wins as long as this stuff works, right? You're helping somebody get out of a bad situation. You're creating a new homeowner. You're getting, a better return on your money, and we're able to connect all those dots and kind of create more. So those agents, what we want to show them is I'm a big fan of lead by example. So how can I tell you go do something if I haven't gone and done it myself? So great. I like single family houses. I know those very well. So it's really easy to walk in and be like, okay, this is what we would do. Sometimes just lending your confidence, like, hey, Kobe, this is what it looks like. It's okay. I know you're a little scared, but I've been here. Like, let's just turn some of the lights on. Let's just take a look. Let's clear out the bad. Let's start with adding some good stuff. And then suddenly it's not as scary doing it. When you have somebody that's kind of guided you before, the journey isn't so treacherous.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for a lot of agents, it's a different world, right? It doesn't matter if it's real estate, right? They've been in a different world of real estate than what an investor is used to, right? A lot of times it can be kind of scary for a listing agent who only does, these pristine homes to get into a house that needs a little bit of rehab, right? They haven't seen something like that. So have you guys seen or come across like some agents who are maybe wanting to get into investing or have maybe considered it? But maybe puts up a little bit of resistance, right? Just because it's a new world to them. It's a completely new, field of real estate. Are you seeing some of that resistance? And maybe what are some of the specific things that are holding agents back from diving into being an investor or even helping other investors, right? To get more deals done just through their license.
So, Kobe, I've seen a lot of different people like in that scenario, right? So, because I used to speak at some of the different clubs, um, I remember there was one guy. He's like, I joined real estate to become basically what I was doing, right? Flipping houses and doing stuff like that. I thought I needed to become an agent. So I went and became an agent. And then they told me to do all this stuff, right? Drink the Kool-Aid, do all this. And he's like, now I'm stuck in these. He happened to be in the high-end houses, under one of these bigger characters. And he's like, I'm stuck. I can't leave now. I can't, it's not what I want. How do I get, like, I got lost because people create this freaking engine thinking they're selling their dream or the dream they bought into, not realizing one size doesn't fit all. That's why so much of the mindset is such a big deal. We use the term roadmap. You know, he took somebody else's roadmap and was following it, and there was a disconnect. Um, and that's not uncommon, that storyline. So what needs to happen in a sense is a reset. Call it a retreat, call it some seminars, call it something where it's like, okay, how do I get out of the situation I found myself in? Make a plan, build your roadmap, get back on track. You don't need to start out and buy, 10 houses your first month. Buy one. Just start with one. Once you have one, you can always go to two. It's that process, because you think of like if I would have told my story, like if I would have known all that was coming, I probably wouldn't have said yes to it, but it was just like, hey, how do I do my first deal? And it took me a while to get my first deal. I'm a huge fan of getting a coach. I got a coach, I found a partner, a mentor, we're going to do this stuff. And, but he kept telling me, Kevin, I don't know what you want. Like, I don't actually know how to do that. I should have got a different coach at that point, like a different partner. But I needed that person to hold me accountable. And it was one of those, like, once I got up there, um, there's so much more, go with the goers, move with the movers, like that whole mentality. I remember we were sitting at a seminar and there was a bunch of us and we're like, yeah, let's start an accountability. Let's do this together. So we were sitting together and, he structured his first deal. I was like, damn, I'm not as good as this guy. And then I see him 10 years later and he was talking about that one deal he did. He's back to corporate America doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, oh, you didn't do anything else. I was like, okay, like I'm glad I didn't chain myself to him. You need to find somebody who's been there before. Um, so I might have derailed your question a little bit, uh, but how the other one is, so I'm used to the people who are more investors and want to get into the agent world. Or do I need to do that, Kevin? Is that there? And it's one of those like, dude, if you read the tea leaves, things are happening, right? You get it, put yourself in a situation. Think of all the people who run a meetup group or a RIA. They're in front of the room, right? The new room is podcasts and different videos and stuff like, you have this influence over people, you're teaching them and you're providing something good. Why not become an agent? It's not that crazy expensive. And then now they don't have to pay you a bunch of money, but just put them in your downline. And now when they do stuff, it benefits everybody. Like it's just one of those like, it's kind of common sense why this stuff makes sense. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very beneficial for investors to get licensed, right? Especially if they have a big influence, especially if they're out there, doing a lot of, direct to seller marketing. You can even capitalize, even if you're not doing the deals yourself, by referring them to another listing agent who's more used to doing, kind of traditional listings, right? That an investor isn't. So there's a lot of benefit on both sides, right? For an agent to work with investors, but also on the other side of things as well. So I'm glad you brought up the podcasting side because, you also run your own podcast as well, very successful, top 5% in the world. So for investors out there, for agents out there that want to maybe start increasing their influence, what's the benefit of podcasting, right? What would you suggest would you suggest somebody go out there and start their own podcast first, maybe start getting on some other podcasts as a guest just to see how it goes? Is there a benefit to starting your own podcast if you're an investor or an agent?
so Oh boy. So there is a cost to running a podcast, right? So you might be more tech savvy than I am, Kobe. Like I'll go ahead. I know houses. I understand people, computers, and tech. Like that's not my gig, and that's okay, right? So I could bring in experts, just like doing my paperwork. I understand what it is. I know what it is. But I also hire experts to come in and do the paperwork. Same with tax. Like I'm not that guy, but I have experts that could come in and they do know that. So with podcasts, I hired Jake is his name, and he is fantastic. It's his vision and his guidance. I even had a podcast coach, that I went through some basic steps. But for me, I was noticing I was running live events. Like, did you run any meetups or RIAs?
No, so when I started, it was during COVID. It was a weird time.
So I was, speaking of that, when I split my larger company, me and my partner there, we bought the live events company out of that group. We're like, okay, we'll take this, you take that. And we're like, hooray, we're here, COVID. And I was like, oh shit. Like we signed the contracts. It's, $1,200 a month for this event. No, and then they're like, well, nobody could show up, but we're still gonna, because you signed a contract, you're still gonna pay us. I was like, wait a minute, like this didn't work out well. But so we learned, so we had to convert that a few different times. But it was like, okay, I'm running live events. I have people come in, but I don't like always running my events at night. I have a family. I want to get home. I want to see their baseball games. I don't want to lose that time. So then we switched over to a daytime meeting, and that's great because it fits better for me, but then I can't fill the room up as much. You know, Before and after COVID, like we were having 100+ people in a room. After COVID, it was like 70 and 50, and then it was like, okay, it's getting smaller. Because people want to do it, people don't want to do it, so it was a weird thing. So by switching it to podcasts, like streaming and stuff like we're doing here, I can have that conversation and it's out there forever. My first episodes are out there. My first 5 episodes, I call them the monologues, but it's basically my weekend seminar that I do about life coaching, basically, and understanding the different sides of it. Anybody could go and buy it and or just watch it. Like it's not just use it. Apply the steps, live a better life, go. And then I interview people about their low parts, so I call them forging moments. But what was something that you went and you thought was going to destroy you, and it turns out that's actually what made you who you are. And I just love that, and it's actually what we're turning it into a book like right now. We're almost done with it, but it's just one of those like, how can I help impact people's lives better? Right? Real estate is a powerful, powerful tool, right? It's a sword. It could do so many wonderful things, but it's also two-sided. It could give you a great life, but it also could take away your life too if you don't know how to wield it correctly. Because entrepreneurship, there's no parameters. What time are you done? I don't know. When are you done? The best way I've said it is becoming an entrepreneur is like every day's a Saturday. So people are like, all right, but you have to work Saturday. It's like, oh shit. Like it's that feeling like, when are you done? I don't know. But you also have to set, okay, this is acceptable, this is.
Right. And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, because in the beginning you're excited, you start to get momentum, and that's when you just push and pound it, and then that's where people start getting burned out. So you have to set parameters, and then especially when you're taking appointments with other people as well, that's when you need to set, when do I stop taking appointments, or do I just take appointments 24/7, right? So it's a journey, and I think having podcasts like this where you're sharing your story and you're interviewing other people who have maybe slightly different journeys that can always give tidbits here and there is very beneficial, right? If you're starting out, if you're in a different part of your journey, if you're trying to move up, scale up, right? Maybe scale down as well. There's always something you can learn from somebody. So I think it's very powerful to have a podcast and also to, appear on podcasts as well.
This is like the new version of what like billboards are, right? This is your virtual billboards. And the more people, right? By me being here, I get to speak to your whole following. Like, how cool is that? And it's like once you hear it from many people in different ways, like find the way that it speaks to you. And that's like, okay, I want to be like this guy. I want to be like this guy. I like this. Or they're just saying the same thing, but it's just like, okay, now it's time. Now I have the confidence to do it. All these people have said it's time. I need to do it. So.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, just want to say thank you for taking some time today, getting out here and having a podcast with myself and being on the show and sharing your value as well. So, for our listeners or viewers out there that want to learn more about what you do, that want to get connected with you, that maybe want to learn, right, if they're an investor, how to become an agent, or the other side of things, if they're an agent, how to be an investor, what are the best places to connect with you? How can people find your podcast, find your social medias? Where can people start following you?
Oh, dude, thank you, Kobe. So our podcast is called the Kevin Dairaghi Show. I actually hired five people to come up with the name, and that's what they came up with. So I'm like, okay, like we'll run with that. But we really talk about real life real estate. So you could find that the Kevin Dairaghi Show. Really, if you could spell my last name, you can find me almost anywhere, right? So we're on the socials. We do those things. But then my personal buying company is RestoreSTL. So there you could see the AI little things that we're building out there. Because again, we want to give stuff to people, right? How can you help educate yourself to making a good decision? So going to RestoreSTL, using kevindairaghi.com or checking us out on the socials would be probably the best way of getting a hold of it. So we too are looking at growing and just kind of empowering people to becoming a better fulfilled people so we could affect more people positively. So.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to leave your show links and your social links in the show notes and the description down below so people can find you easily. But other than that, Kevin, just want to say thank you again for being on the show, man. And before we let you go, is there any last tidbits, any last piece of advice, just one last thing you want to leave with the audience here today?
So one of the quotes that I've grew up always doing was from Walt Disney. If you could dream it, you could do it. Uh, and then that sounds great because but there's a whole aspect of doing inside there. So I found that if I just rephrase it a little bit, Kobe, dream big and act accordingly. So have those dreams, but then go out there and do those steps. Even if it's one step a day towards the destination, it does make, you're laying the foundation. So then when you're there, it's there. You could get there. So dream big and act accordingly.
Absolutely. I love that, man. Kevin, thanks so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show. Take care.